In 1990, a man in a pressed shirt set a leather binder on a kitchen table in Ohio. For 40 minutes, he never once said the price. When the number finally arrived, it sat somewhere between $1,500 and $2,200 for 32 volumes weighing 129 pounds. That same year, the middle American household brought in about $30,000 before tax. He was asking two tired parents for the better part of a month's income on a weeknight, with the children sent upstairs. Put the two objects side by side because the whole story fits in that one frame. On the left, 32 volumes and 40 million words carried into your living room by a man who drove there himself. On the right, 3 years later, one silver disc at $99 and very often free in the box with a new computer. One of them paid a salesman $500 or $600 a set. The other cost about $1.50 to press. But what almost nobody says out loud is that the man at the table wasn't selling books. He was selling a worry, built carefully and delivered in order. Your child was already behind, and you were the reason she'd stay there. The uncomfortable part of this story, the part I keep turning over, is how often that worry turned out to be right. So the question I want to put on the table is this one. How did a cheap silver disc end a sales empire built on parents' fear that their children would fall behind? One man worked a territory like that for 28 years, and what landed on his desk in 1996 is where all of this ends up. The sets are still here, in basements all over this country, spines unbroken. The trade that put them there vanished. Start with the object, because the object is genuinely magnificent, and that matters. Britannica first appeared in Edinburgh in weekly installments beginning in 1768, sold a few pages at a time to Scottish subscribers. 2 centuries later, it had grown into the most ambitious reference work in the English language, and in 1974, the company shipped its 15th edition. The editorial work alone cost $32 million. That figure was, by Britannica's own account, the largest single private investment in publishing history up to that time. Mortimer Adler took over as chairman of the board of editors that same year, and he rebuilt the whole thing around a strange 3-part idea. One set of volumes for quick answers, another for long articles by named scholars. Then a single slim volume whose only job was to show how all human knowledge fit together. By the 1985 revision, it ran to 32 volumes and roughly 40 million words. 129 pounds of paper arriving at your door on a Saturday, usually in 2 boxes a man had to carry in himself. The buyer got a yearbook every autumn to keep the thing current, and often a bookcase too. The whole shelf went wherever the family judged a visitor would see it. Now for the part every family in America knows, and nobody quite says. Almost nobody read them. A child looked up 3 things for a school report in 1987 and never opened the set again. The volumes went on standing in perfect order, spines uncracked. They've held up one end of a basement shelf for 35 years since. Hold that shelf in your mind, because this whole story comes back to it. If you want the vanished American institutions nobody thought to film while they were still running, this channel is where they get written down. Subscribe, and the next one will find you. But a book that expensive doesn't sell itself off a shelf, and that's the odd fact hiding underneath all of it. You couldn't walk into a store in 1985 and buy one. Britannica built its American field force starting in 1932, and by the late 1980s, it had grown into something close to an army. At its height, the company ran about 2,300 door-to-door salespeople across the United States and Canada. Every one of them drove a territory and worked it on foot, evening after evening, at strangers' kitchen tables. The economics were brutal and simple. A salesman took roughly $500 to $600 in commission out of every set he closed. A good year paid better than most professions a man could name without a degree. It also meant nobody in that building could imagine selling knowledge any other way. The set had a price because the man had a car and the car had a route. World Book over in Chicago ran the same play at a far larger scale. By the company's own history, it once fielded more than 40,000 door-to-door sellers, many of them school teachers working summers. If you grew up in America before 1975, somebody rang your bell about books. We've covered another version of that ritual on this channel, the brush man with his sample case, so I'll leave him where he is. Now, none of this was what you'd call candid, and the government said so twice. In 1961, the Federal Trade Commission handed Britannica a cease and desist order over the oldest opener in the trade. That's the one where a prominent local family has been specially selected to receive a free set. Then the commission filed a much larger complaint in December 1972, and its final order came down in March of 1976. Read that file and the machinery is all laid out. Blind help-wanted advertisements that never named the company or the actual job. Recruits promised guaranteed monthly incomes of $500 to $1,000 under conditions the commission found nobody could realistically meet. Men calling at the door with a clipboard, presenting themselves as survey takers with an advertising research questionnaire, and saying out loud, if asked, that they weren't salesmen. So the door got you in. But what happened once a man was sitting at your table with the coffee poured and both parents present? That's the part almost nobody has written down properly. By the accounts of men who worked it, the pitch had a shape, and the shape rarely varied. Rule 1 was that both parents had to be in the room. A father alone would say he'd think about it. A mother alone would say she'd have to ask. Two of them together, sitting across from each other, could not defer to anyone, and that was the entire point of the appointment. Rule 2 was that he sat where he could see the children. The children were upstairs, so he settled for their photographs, and the report cards stuck to the refrigerator door. He asked their ages. He asked what grade and what subject each one liked. Then he wrote the answers in the binder where the parents could watch him do it. Then the sample volume came out, always open to the same kind of page. The human body printed on clear plastic overlays that you lifted one at a time. Muscles first. Lift again, and you're down to bone. A child couldn't look at that page and stay bored. No parent could watch a child look at it and stay neutral. And then, gently, the question that did the actual work. What do you tell her when she asks you something and you don't know the answer? He says it kindly, and it barely registers as a sales line. Just a hole opened in the middle of a kitchen, and 129 pounds of paper sitting out in the man's car, ready to fill it. There was one more card, and it was a beauty. Buy the set, he'd say, and your family gets the library research service. Write to Chicago with any question at all, on any subject, and a researcher will answer it personally. Imagine that offered to a mother in a small town in 1970, before a single household in America could look anything up. The Federal Trade Commission later found that most of those answers were form letters, but the promise in the room at the table was enormous. He was arguably the finest amateur psychologist in American commerce, and he was paid by the set. But he still had the same problem he'd had out on the doorstep. Nobody in that house had $1,500, so he never once asked for $1,500. The installment contract gets left out of every fond retelling of this business. It's also the piece that made the whole trade possible. The set was never priced as a set at the kitchen table. It was priced as a small repeating number. So much a month, so much a week, sometimes broken down to the cost per day. Spread across the years the child had left at home. That's an old trick and a good one, and it works because the human brain compares a weekly figure to a weekly figure. A few dollars a week sits next to the milk bill and looks harmless. The same money, stated once as a total, sits next to a used car and looks insane. Underneath the friendly little number was a financing agreement with interest running on top of it. The signature line sat at the bottom of a page nobody read carefully at 9 at night. The set arrived in 2 boxes some weeks later. The payments ran for years afterward. long after the plastic overlays had lost their novelty, and sometimes long after the child had left for college, and when a family fell behind on that friendly little number, the trade had an answer for that too. The same 1976 commission order describes collection letters sent to buyers who fell behind on what looked like an attorney's letterhead. Those letters threatened lawsuits that were mostly never coming. A pitch built on a parent's love for a child, closed on a payment plan, and enforced with a lawyer who wasn't real. That's the trade at its least flattering, and I want all of it on the record before I say the next thing. Because the easy version of this story ends right here, with an anxious mother and a padded contract. That's where most people stop. Here's the objection a sharp viewer is already forming, and it deserves a straight answer. The objection goes like this. The books mostly went unread, so the salesman sold nothing but a feeling. And that feeling was manufactured in a training room in Chicago to separate working families from money they didn't have. It's the smart reading. It's also, on the evidence, wrong about the most important part. In 2010, 4 researchers published a study in the journal Research in Social Stratification and Mobility, looking at home libraries across 27 nations. Mariah Evans and her colleagues looked at children raised in a house holding roughly 500 books. Those children completed, on average, 3.2 more years of schooling than children raised with almost none. In the United States, the gap came out around 2.5 years. The effect held after controlling for the parents' own education, their occupation, and their income. Read that again because it's the hinge of everything. Having the books in the house did about as much for a child as having university-educated parents instead of barely literate ones. And the researchers found that even 20 books moved the needle. It held across 27 countries, rich and poor alike, which is the kind of result that's hard to argue away. Nobody in that study had to finish anything. So the man at the kitchen table, working from a script written to open a wound, was describing a real mechanism. He couldn't have cited it because the evidence arrived 30 years after he retired. He simply knew, the way salesmen know things, that a house with books in it produces different children than a house without. And that's where this story stops being what it looks like. This turns out to be the story of an expensive, clumsy, high-pressure delivery system for something that genuinely worked. The delivery system is the only part of it that died. The wager those parents made was mostly a good wager. They just paid a terrible price for the privilege of making it. And within 3 years, a company in Redmond would offer them the same wager for nothing. Microsoft went shopping for an encyclopedia in the late 1980s, and the first door it knocked on was Britannica's. The company owned Compton's, a solid mid-market set with a young digital operation attached, and Microsoft wanted it. Stanley Frank, running that side of the business, turned the offer down. Britannica sold Compton's to the Tribune Corporation in 1993 instead. So Microsoft licensed the text of Funk and Wagnalls instead, a supermarket encyclopedia sold a volume at a time beside the checkout lane. Then it shipped Encarta in early 1993. It launched at $395, which was already a fraction of a printed set. By the holiday season, the price had dropped to $99, and it sold 350,000 copies in its first year. Then came the part that actually finished the argument. Encarta got bundled into the machines. A family walked into a store in 1994 and bought a computer marketed as a multimedia PC. The encyclopedia was already inside it, at no separate charge, with sound clips and a globe that spun. Pressing that disc cost the manufacturer somewhere around $1.50. Printing, binding, warehousing, and shipping 129 pounds of paper cost a great deal more. And that's before anyone was paid a commission on it. The cost structures weren't in the same league. They weren't in the same sport. None of this was a total surprise, mind you. Grolier had put an encyclopedia on a disc as early as 1985 for under $90. It went nowhere because almost no household owned a drive that could read it. By 1993, the idea was exactly the same. What had changed is that the drive had quietly arrived in millions of American living rooms. A whole industry had 8 years to see that coming and spent them selling more paper. Britannica did answer in fairness and answered fast for a company of its age. It put its own text on a disk in 1994 and moved a development team onto the internet inside a month. But the Britannica CD carried a price near $1,000, while the disk in the computer store cost $99. Which raises the obvious question, the one that hangs over the entire collapse. Why on earth didn't they just cut the price? Commission checks held the whole company underwater. They couldn't, and the reason they couldn't is the most quietly tragic thing in this whole account. Every dollar Britannica made walked through those 2,300 salespeople. Cut the product's price to $99, and the commission goes with it. The moment the commission goes, the field force stops driving. A man doesn't spend his Tuesday evening in a stranger's kitchen doing 40 minutes of unpaid psychology for a $10 cut. The company's single greatest asset had become a floor it could not price below. So the numbers did what numbers do. Britannica's set sales peaked in 1990 at roughly 120,000 sets. Revenue that year hit an all-time high of about $650 million. By 1994, the sets sold had fallen to around 51,000. In 4 years, half the business had walked out of the door, and it had not gone to a rival encyclopedia. It had gone to a free disk that came with the computer. Understand what that meant inside the building. Those salesmen were losing to something their customers didn't even experience as a purchase. It arrived with a machine the family had already decided to buy. Nobody had to be persuaded, because nobody had to be visited. Joseph Esposito, running the company in the middle of that decade, later described moving the whole development team onto an internet product within 30 days. That was the right call, and it came several years too late. The thing draining the company was the payroll attached to the product. And in 1996, somebody finally did the arithmetic all the way to the bottom of the page. By 1996, revenue had fallen to roughly half what it had been 6 years earlier. The family that had owned Britannica for decades sold the company. The buyer was a Swiss financier named Jacob Safra. He went straight at the cost line the whole industry had been staring at since Encarta shipped. The entire remaining door-to-door sales force in the United States and Canada was let go. That ended roughly 60 years of men and women knocking on American doors with a sample volume under one arm. It happened as a decision taken in a room on a single afternoon, then carried out over a great many phone calls. Among the people that reached was Myron Taxman, and he's the man I promised you at the start. He'd started selling Britannica at 22 while he was still in college in Chicago. He sold it for 28 years, finishing on a 32-volume set priced at $1,395. In good years, he cleared 6 figures doing it, and his own company called him one of the best in the country at it. That job stopped existing on a Tuesday. If this is the kind of thing you want more of, go and watch the Green Stamps film on this channel. It answers a question I get asked constantly. Why did millions of otherwise sensible Americans spend their evenings licking stamps into little books to earn a toaster? Now hold on, because the disk didn't win either. Microsoft announced the end of Encarta in March 2009 and shut the sites down that October, killed off by a free encyclopedia written by volunteers. Britannica printed its last set in 2010 and announced the end of the presses on March 13, 2012. The final 12,000 sets sold down to nothing by that April. World Book, quietly, still prints one every year. Its set runs around $1,000, and it moves something over 10,000 of them annually. The field force that once numbered 40,000 is now fewer than 100 people, selling mostly to schools and libraries. So the salesman went, the disc that killed him followed him out, and the books stayed exactly where they were put. Count up what that ugly, pushy, overpriced trade was actually moving through American neighborhoods, and it runs a good deal further than paper. It moved an idea from one house to the next. A child's future was a thing a family could buy a piece of, in advance, with money it didn't really have. That's what a country loses when the whole transaction becomes free and instant. The facts themselves are in better shape than ever, more current, and a second away from anyone holding a phone. What went missing is the deciding. Nobody sits at a table anymore and chooses out loud in front of a spouse to spend a month's income. The child never asked for it, and that was always the point. We answer the question faster than any generation in history, and we no longer make the gesture. Perhaps the gesture was always the real product, and the salesman with his overlays understood that better than the company that employed him. So picture a basement in Michigan on a wet afternoon, right now. An old man is down there looking for a box of Christmas lights. His granddaughter has followed him down the stairs because a basement is more interesting than a kitchen. She stops at the shelf. 32 volumes, dark green, gold on the spines, dust along the top edge, and not one crease in any of them. She pulls out the one marked M, and it opens stiff, the way a book opens when nobody has ever broken it in. He watches her find the page with the plastic overlays, the muscles lifting away to show the bone underneath. He doesn't tell her that his mother signed for these at a kitchen table in 1971. The payments ran until he was in high school. He just lets her turn the sheets. The dehumidifier hums. Upstairs, somebody is running water. She turns the overlays back the other way, bone to organs to muscle, and asks him if he read them. He says not really. She asks why they bought them then, and he takes a good long while with that one. The honest answer is that his mother couldn't have told you either. She only knew that a man had sat in her kitchen and named the thing she was already afraid of. Saying yes felt like doing something about it. Every unread set in an American basement is a receipt. A family once decided a child was worth the better part of a month's pay.